And this is why people that work on biological age reversal will literally reverse their biological age. That when I got sick, I was 38. I'm now 44. When I got sick, I tested my biological age and I was 43. So inside, I was about 5 years older than myself. I'm now 44. So, 5-6 years have passed and my biological age is tested as 33.
Oh, so if I start using Nivea, does it mean I'm going to drop dead tomorrow? One of the roots to chronic disease is a constant state of inflammation. And that is sometimes about what we put on our skin, what we put into our body, what we spray under our armpits, what we put onto our hair. Like, we're literally setting our body alight and it's walking around on fire, whilst also putting more shit in our mouth.
A news that came out where zoos are having challenges with malnutrition because the fruit is so genetically altered and so sweet that animals are refusing to eat it.
In this week's episode, we are talking all things peak performance, biohacking, chronic disease and how to prevent it, slowing down your aging and also growing businesses. He's a celebrity biohacker, a book of knowledge when it comes to understanding DNA, and I'm so excited to have him on the Daniel Lees podcast. For you that are joining for the first time, welcome along. This is actually, I say this every week, I'm like, this is a great episode to join the show on, but this is generally like going to be such an awesome episode. So many nuggets of wisdom, especially when it comes to your health. So if you haven't already, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And if you like this episode, make sure you give us a follow. But before we get started, thank you very much to our sponsors, Ansem Skin, a natural skincare range for men. I think they're going to love this one, this episode as well, because it's right in line with why they do what they do and why they have natural skincare ranges, because of the amount of toxins you find in high street products these days. Now, please join me in welcoming this week's guest, Mr. Biohacker himself, Kashif Khan.
Pleasure, man. Good to be here with you.
How you doing?
Pretty good.
Yeah.
Doing good. Yeah.
I'm kind of, I feel like a bit of a fanboy right now because I consume all your content online. I've watched like pretty much all of your episodes on podcasts and stuff like that. And it's genuinely like quite nice to just be able to talk to you. And because, with social media, you just kind of see that face all the time and you listen to it, you kind of feel like you know them. And then you're like, well, I've actually never had a conversation with this person before. So to be able to have this and take some time out of your day to share your wisdom is an absolute honor. So thank you.
No, it's a pleasure, man. It's great work you're doing here. So happy to be here.
I think before we get started, for those that may not have come across you before, who are you and what do you do?
So my background actually isn't aligned with what I do, and that's part of the story. Is I was actually quite sick, so I ran a startup business where I would help technology startups grow in Toronto. Toronto has a sort of bustling Silicon Valley North type technology scene, and so that's what I did. And I got really sick. I got crazy psoriasis. My knuckles were bleeding. I had eczema to the point where my left eye was literally like sealed shut. I couldn't open it. Patches all over my skin. Migraines were probably the worst part. Couldn't get out of bed. Had to leave the office all the time just to sleep. Couldn't function. Gut issues, depression. So going to all these doctors, my question would be why? Like I'm 38 at that time. Never been sick. Never had any issues. Why all of a sudden everything all at once? I must have done something wrong. And from there, I learned that's not what they do. They don't figure out why you got sick. They tell you what it's called and what pill to take. Yeah. I had never been through that before. So I started to dig on my own, being sort of a problem solver. This is what I did in my business. I helped these companies solve problems and grow. And I started to learn how the body works. I started to understand biology. I started to understand how much more in control we are than we think.
Yeah.
And how we aren't destined for disease. It's caused and we just don't know the causes. And from there, the big aha moment for me was I learned that there was massive failures in my genetic code. That there were certain functions that my body was supposed to be doing that it just wasn't.
Yeah.
Because the code was either broken or missing. And that's why the same exact expression of lifestyle, diet, etc. as me, my family, my business partners only made me sick. And why I believed I was actually sick. And why medicine tells you have a problem. So I healed myself, healed family members, healed friends, started to research it, built a research company around it, started to take that research and plug it into clinics. And fast forward till today, we've helped tens of thousands of people unwind chronic disease, slow their aging down, find peak performance through understanding what their genetic code is trying to tell them.
Yeah, because I that was one thing that I was actually like surprised by because anyone, and I'll leave your social media so people can obviously follow you afterwards. Like you are like a book of knowledge, like you know everything about anything, and every time there's something new to talk about, you're like you have like what seems to be the answer. So if you're not a doctor, like how much time did you spend learning about these things, and how did you learn these things?
So the first learning was me trying to fix myself, right? And and really that kind of knowledge is not from a textbook. It comes from purpose. When you're learning because you're on a mission, it's like a sea sponge just sucking it all in,
Yeah.
right? When you're learning something you don't want to learn, go back to high school and think about that, how hard it was to study and remember
Mm.
things, right? So the big lesson for me and where does the learning come from is our patience. So every single day, and by the way, that's what my social media account was. It was a place for me to vent. Go back a year or so, I had never used social media before, maybe a
Yeah.
year and a half, right? And I really saw what was really making people sick. And I realized they didn't need to be. Chronic disease was an option based if they knew what habits they should have had. And so I started to talk about some of those things, and it's from healing thousands of people that I keep learning all these problems and just new things keep coming up.
Yeah.
And my intention is just to warn the world, and that's turned into a community of amazing people that are, I literally think thousands of lives have been saved because of simple things that I've said online.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I stumbled across mainly cosmetics, mainly what you find in cosmetics. I saw one of your posts, and we'll talk about cosmetics later on and sunscreen and stuff like that. But I stumbled across the topic, and everyone always used to say to me, like, "How do you know so much about like cosmetic products?" And I'm like, anybody can access this information. It's out there. Like,
Yeah.
all you need to do is have a purpose. I wasn't necessarily sick at the time, but one of my purposes was I was so horrified at what these ingredients, and it's staring at you. It's on the back of the
Yeah.
packaging. Like it's almost like they're like laughing at you and going like, I'm actually going to tell you what's in it, and you're going to be so stupid to not even look at it.
Yeah.
And yeah, but how did you? So how talk about the personal journey of healing yourself then? So what was the actual root cause of your problem?
So there was multiple, but to paint a picture of how the genome can really inform what's really going on, there's a gene called GSTM1, and its purpose is the primary purpose. Many genes do many things, and that's another thing misconception that here's this gene, here's that gene. Genes do multiple jobs, but the primary function was first line of defense for the gut. So when I go eat something, the pesticides, chemicals, packaging, food colorings that come along with it, you're supposed to have a driver of glutathione, this master antioxidant that binds and collects these toxins, removes them, pee them out, poop them out, sweat them out, the liver does its job. I don't have that gene. It's not even what version, what variant. It's literally missing from my genetic code. It's a unique phenomenon called a copy number variation, meaning how many copies of the gene did you get?
Mm.
And so because I don't have the gene, I don't do this job. And so at the time, I thought I was doing something right because I had very basic, low level knowledge on health and wellness, but I remember hearing the Mediterranean diet is great. It's clean. So I thought, okay, I'll do that. And so all these downtown lunches I was having with my, clients and business partners, there was a couple of Lebanese Mediterranean style places I would go, salad, meat, and some hummus. And what I didn't realize was that in Canada, there's laws around the use of chemicals in certain foods because we have long winters, so agriculture is difficult. It
Mm.
shortens the yield, right? So there's chemicals that are allowed to be used here that are legal in UK and other parts of the world to dry things faster, so that you can store them for longer, and also get them back to their original state faster, so that they can be sold on time. These chemicals are potent inflammatory toxins. And when you study them, you're studying them amongst mass population where most people aren't missing the genetic code that I'm missing and can to some degree detoxify it. So the personalization around what is your red flag, what is your broken biology, what means the most to you, right? As opposed to this was okay for most people, so hopefully it's also okay for me. And that was one of many things. I mean, there's 22,000 genes in the human genome. There's about 100 or so that are functional that will tell you the major pathways like hormones, detoxification, metabolism, neurochemicals of the brain, sleep, micronutrients, macronutrients, all those things. There's less than 100 that you need to understand to drive the kind of outcomes I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I
I-
learned that a good 15% of that needed work.
Is that just because those 100 are kind of like the main drivers and then the rest kind of feed into those main drivers? Is that how it works?
Well, the most of the genome is what we call genetics. So let's think about going to the doctor is medicine. Here's what your disease is called, and here's the pill you need to take. Diagnose and prescribe. Functional medicine is why did you get sick? What did you eat? What did you breathe? What was the cause?
Hmm.
The same is true for genetic research. There's genetics, whereas this gene means this, and that's it. Then there's functional genomics, which is why did somebody with that gene still not get sick? What were they doing right? Or why did somebody with that gene get sick a lot faster? What were they doing wrong? The combination of the genes, environment, nutrition, and lifestyle, the full picture, how we actually practically apply this stuff. So most genes are not really actionable.
Yeah.
Meaning you have it, it's doing what it's doing, your eyes are blue, your earlobe is connected to your head or not. Things like that that really you don't need to know. You can tell by looking in a mirror. The internal biological function that drives chronic disease is really in six big buckets, and I can tell you what they are. Everything about mood and behavior, because if you're stressed or if you're stuck in a fight or flight, the body won't heal. You have to be in a regenerative state or it just won't fix itself. The body is designed to heal, but when you're in fight or flight, it won't. It's very binary, one or two. Then there's sleep. If you're not sleeping, you're not recovering. All of the detox processes, lymphatic drainage of the brain, lymphatic drainage of the body, glutathione looking for nonsense to remove from your bloodstream so you're ready to pee it out in the morning. All that happens in the first half of your deep sleep, right? Then there's everything about metabolism. How healthy are my cells based on the foods that I eat versus my ability to actually turn them into fuel? Should I be a vegan? Should I be carnivore? Does starch matter? Do I need to go low carb? Does it all matter to me? And the answers are not the same for everybody. So innate metabolism. Then number four of six is everything around chronic disease, which is we don't think of disease as, hey, you have an 80% chance of dementia. That's what genetics is. It's more like here's dementia, it's brain inflammation leading to the death of brain cells. Here's the broken biology in you that leads to brain inflammation. So if we mask that, it's not going to happen.
Hmm.
Then there's cellular health. So everything, if you look at the top 15 killers, at least where I am in North America, 14 of them are rooted in inflammation. So meaning if you don't have inflammation, you can't get 14 of the top 15 diseases that kill people. You
Yeah.
have to have inflammation. The terrain has to be in the state for that disease to manifest. So why would that happen? Detox, antioxidation, glucuronidation. There's all these processes your body uses to remove different types of toxins from mold to chemicals to plastics, etc. So knowing that and what your threats are. And lastly, everything around hormones. So especially important when it comes to women's health, fibromyalgia, infertility, menopause, menstrual cycle, all driven by this hormone cascade, which is treated as a very gray area. Well, you're a woman, you're supposed to be screwed up. It's supposed to be bad, right? Versus
Hmm.
if you understood the genetics of how you make hormones, it can be very, very easy to deal with. So those six systems are comprised of less than 100 genes of the 22,000 in your human instruction manual. But they are the most important pathways that drive everything. If you get everything right, it is very, very, very difficult to have a chronic disease and you will age much slower.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that because when you, especially when I talk to men about like cosmetic products, this most sarcastic comment I'll always get back is, "Oh, so if I start using Nivea, does it mean I'm going to drop dead tomorrow?" And
Yeah.
you try and explain to people that one of the roots, and this is why I'm so glad you said it, is one of the roots to chronic disease is a constant state of inflammation. And that is sometimes about what we put on our skin, what we put into our body, what we spray under our armpits, what we put onto our hair. Like we're literally setting our body alight and it's walking around on fire. and
Yeah.
then we're expecting it to work at its optimal state, whilst also putting more shit in our mouth, you know?
Yeah, and people have been trained by medical studies to think about things siloed and separate. If I have some Nivea, is it going to kill me? Well, that Nivea is one of many things you did in that day. What's the total accumulative load? Right? And the average woman is putting 500 chemicals a day on her body
Yeah.
between her shampoos, soaps, perfumes, all of this stuff. It takes 26 seconds by the time you put something on your skin for it to enter your bloodstream and be literally causing havoc everywhere, causing inflammation. So if you wouldn't eat it, I wouldn't put it on my skin.
Yeah.
It's another form of getting. It's actually much faster than eating it. The pace at which it gets to your bloodstream. So now the total cumulative load, we know that today the average Western country adult is eating about a credit card worth of plastic in a week. You know, and
Yeah.
so but we don't think of that as the siloed. Well, I'm eating this thing in this packaging. I took this takeout food. I'm having my potato chips in this bag. Total cumulative load. You have to think about all of what you do in a day and what it adds up to, far beyond what the body's capable of. That's why each of these micro things that you remove mean something.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's obviously a huge threat coming from every single angle by the sounds of it. But what would you say is the actual biggest threat right now to us, like our genetics?
I would say so. There's been chemicals added to humanity since the 1970s.
How many, sorry?
144,000. The majority of those are for our food supply. And the majority of that has to do with shelf life and flavor, right? Flavor, make it addictive. Shelf life, make it last longer and more profitable.
Yeah.
So that big concern, but the majority of when you walk into where we now get our groceries from, the majority of what you see in there is not food. It is filler, it is flavor, it is satisfaction, it is pleasure. The food is the stuff that you get at the farmer's market. Food is meant to be simple. So that's a major, major threat. A more sort of a silent killer in the background that people don't think of is EMF. So all of the electronic pollution, especially the Wi-Fi. So EMF is kind of like today's tobacco. It's this constant secondhand smoke that's always there, whether it's your home Wi-Fi, whether you're in an office, whether you're even outside next to the 4 or 5G towers. The challenge there is when you get a cell phone, the data, safety data that allows cell phones to be cleared for use is based on research from the 19 when a
Wow.
cell phone, if you picture a cell phone from the 1980s, it was a brick. It was not a supercomputer in your pocket. It was a very base level technology that did not have the power or EMF of what we now use. A current cell phone signals a cell phone tower 900 times a minute. It's like you're making 900 phone calls in your pocket every minute. And the safety data also is based on military men from the American military who were over 6 feet two, I think. So they were like 6'4", 6'5". So their skulls were 4 times the thickness of an average child, double the thickness of an average woman, and thicker than the average male because they were large military men. So all the safety data doesn't apply to today's context and our kids on our iPads and phones and walking around with a phone on their head. It tells you right in the instructions when you're using this device, it has to be a minimum 1 inch away from your body. It's in the safety instructions, but we don't read them, right? So that's the other big one is EMF. It's just in the background and not being paid attention to.
Yeah, I mean that's that. I mean, right there, this when you say about the safety instructions, like you don't even think about it, do you? You just think, oh,
Yeah.
I'm just going to get my phone, my iPad, I've literally, if you was in the room with me right now, I've got a phone, an iPad, a laptop. Like, I'm getting bombarded right now, and it's hard not to sit here and just think, like we've all just become very puppet-like, right? There's just the bigger beasts out there that create these things, whether it's the food, the electronics and stuff, and the guinea pigs is us, and it all gets covered up.
Yep. And it's goes beyond. There's other things we can talk about, like our water supply. Where I am in Canada isn't as bad as the United States, but in the US, 30% of American tap water now has forever chemicals in it. chemicals that don't break down, that are massively inflammatory in nature. One third of the country is drinking this stuff if they're not filtering their water. You also have hormones that are in it. Why do you have all these estrogenic men and women with anxiety and crazy menopause issues? The estrogen overload is probably another big one that
Mm,
people have to be cognizant of. It's in the water, it's in the food, it's in your packaging, your plastic. So our hormones are being disrupted. And a lot of these chemicals that you use, when they enter your body doesn't know what the chemical is. It doesn't recognize it. So it treats it as estrogen. And this is what we call an estrogen mimic, which means that it docks into the hormone receptors and utilizes that space. You're not actually using your hormones, and instead you get overloaded with an estrogenic outcome, which is why look at a picture of high school boys today versus 2 generations ago. They look like soldiers 2 generations ago. Now they're all a little bit plump. They all have anxiety. They're moving slower. They're not that active. They're estrogen dominant. Not because they've changed. Our DNA hasn't changed. Their environment has changed. Their hormones are
mm,
being disrupted. Girls at 8 years old are now starting their menstrual cycles regularly,
yeah.
which was unheard of, right?
Yeah, I mean, you said something on your content a while back. I can't, maybe it was content or podcast, but you talk a lot about how our DNA and genetics is still 200,000 years old, and it tracks back that far. And the world that we live in now is just far too evolved for what we're actually designed for.
Yeah, our DNA. So we think about evolution, right? And that we change and adapt. That we haven't even seen evidence of that yet. We've seen it in some plants and animals, but in humans, what we have is here's a gene, here's two or three potential versions of it, and those same options, it's kind of like a Russian roulette of what version you get generation to generation, and it just keeps going in a circle. There's no change. It's the version that grandma had, grandson might have, and it just keeps going, right?
Mm,
So that's been going on for a quarter million years. And if you think about a quarter million years, the vast majority of that time looked nothing like what today looks like.
yeah.
Modern agriculture is 10,000 years old, as what we know. And our current industrialized reality is a couple hundred years old, maybe 300 at the most. And our current toxic soup reality is post 19 and really post 1970s. You want to get micro. So the way we live today is a tiny, tiny, tiny blip in our ancestral heritage, and the majority of the time was spent very differently. And so our DNA doesn't know that it's
Mm.
2024 and that we wake up to what we wake up to. It still thinks that we're cave people, and that's all it has to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, it does beg the question, doesn't it? When you think about the amount of mental health now and the amount of anxiety, and it takes a minute to go, do you know what? You know, what is the problem? It's the world that we're living in where we're bombarded. Like, you imagine, like, thousands of years ago, all we had to do was procreate, survive, and eat. That there were the kind of like key dynamics. Now, I mean, there's so much stuff going on, like bombarded of like so many different things. But one thing I want to talk about now, because again, we spoke about briefly at the beginning, is obviously chronic disease, like, and how important of a conversation this is. Is there any data that shows how long this actually dates back? Like, is it quite a new thing, chronic disease, or is it something that is shown in history?
Yeah, so the rate at which we have chronic disease is new. Even just in the last generation, forget about history. 2 generations ago, 1 in 10,000 kids, sorry, 3 generations ago, 1 in 10,000 kids was autistic. Two generations ago was 1 in 500. It's now 1 in 28. So what happened? The kids
Yeah.
didn't change. Genetically, they're the same. It's the environment, the exposures have changed. The number of mandatory vaccinations have changed. The overdose of heavy metals from the serums have changed, right? So our habits have changed, and we're seeing the dramatic increase in disease. We now have 50 of youth in the United States have a diagnosable chronic condition. Now that number, by the way, is skewed in certain economic communities, lower economic communities, meaning that if you go to lower economic school, it's probably 80%. The flip is also true. It's probably 20% in a different economic setting. So You also see that 50% of Americans are expected to get cancer. That was unheard of. It was a rare
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yeah,
So,
I read that 1 in 2 people will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetimes. That's frightening. Like that's like mind-boggling.
yeah. And so it goes back to the thing you said earlier. There's not more cancer. There's more environmental nutrition and lifestyle toxins that are causing inflammation, and our genome hasn't caught up, and it's not
Mm.
going to. It doesn't change that way, right? So, and there's also more trauma, and there's also lack of sleep, and there's also more stress. So the lifestyle we live is leading us to choices that cause disease. And this is really, in a nutshell, what we're saying is that you weren't born with it. You don't have to have it.
Yeah.
It's a choice based on your habits.
Yeah, I was actually researching just before we did our podcast, and I actually looked into like one of the biggest chronic diseases, and that's heart disease.
Hmm.
It says that the stat that I got was from the World Health Organization that says over 16% of humans globally die from heart disease,
Yeah.
and this actually was uncommon. Um, in the early 1900s. So this was like something that didn't even exist pretty
Yeah.
much just over 100 years ago. So
Yeah.
it generally does, when you start looking at stats like that, it does just like just screams out to you. It's what we're putting in our mouth.
It's the number one killer is cardiovascular disease. And what's going on is the heart is usually fine. The arteries around the heart get inflamed, they get calcified, they get blockages, and the body responds to that inflammation with cholesterol. So the cholesterol that we demonize as a bad thing is a very useful hormone that the body will actually use to smooth out inflammation. It will actually deploy it and send it into the arteries to fix the inflammation. But when that cholesterol meets the toxicity, the free radicals that cause the inflammation to begin with, it also oxidizes and hardens and starts to build up. So the cholesterolemia, which you eventually diagnose because of the number in the blood, is actually your body trying to protect you from what we call endothelial, the inner lining,
Yeah.
endothelial inflammation, right? So why am I saying all this? That the numbers have gone up, not because we have bad hearts, but we have bad air, bad food, bad stress, etc. We've seen hundreds of people where when we identified their broken biology, and we address it at the root cause level, supplementation, food, etc., that they get off of cholesterol pills. So the disease that they think they had was their body trying to cope with their reality, and when you unwind the root cause, all of a sudden they don't have a disease anymore, and they don't need medication. Numbers come down over and over and over and over and over again. So yeah, I would say this is one of the easier ones to resolve, easier ones to prevent, but it's
Yeah.
also one of the easier ones to get if you don't
Yeah.
do anything about it.
So do you think that all these diseases that do exist, not just heart disease but other diseases, are they all preventable?
If they're chronic in nature, yes. There's some conditions that are genetic, meaning that you have it. It's part of your code. You're going to get it.
Mm.
That is a tiny fraction of what we're dealing with. The CDC, the Center for Disease Control in the United States, says that 90 of the American healthcare budget is spent on chronic disease management. So things you don't need to have.
Exactly.
Less, yeah, and so 10% or less is a big chunk of that 10% is also acute, like I broke my arm, those types of things. And then there's the rare genetic conditions, 2 or 3% of that healthcare spend. So the vast majority is a choice.
Mm.
The vast majority is I was not born with this. I was born with some broken biology, like take me. I was missing a certain gut gene, and I had a habit that I didn't know was slowly hurting me, and I ended up with multiple diagnosable conditions. And guess what? I don't have them anymore,
Yeah. Yeah,
right?
I remember even I went to the hospital last week for a checkup because I was starting to feel symptoms like a bit cold and fluey and stuff like that. And he was like, "Oh, we'll just check you over, see how you're doing." And he was like, "Oh, well, we'll get the results back soon, but I'm going to put you on this medication." I was like, "Huh?" He's like, "Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to prescribe you like," and I mean, obviously, I'm a little bit skeptical about these things. I mean, I walked straight out anyway. I mean, I definitely didn't take any of those pills, but
Yeah.
it was just they were just they were so quick to just be like, "Here's some pills." even if we don't know what the problem is right now, here's some pills. And I thought, these people are like, when you're younger, it's like it's indoctrinated into you that the doctor will, fix you and you trust them. And
Yeah.
whereas I think the old, and especially I think now that with the resurgence of like social media, I think we're all starting to think twice now because, how many times have you been to a doctor and they've said, how's your diet? What are you eating? What
Yeah.
foods do you eat? What's good for you? And then I actually did a bit of research on it, and also spoke to some doctors that I do know, and they say that roughly when they're studying for 7 odd years to be a doctor, they probably spend about 5% or less on what you eat and the foods.
If medication worked, why do you have to keep taking it?
Yeah,
Why do you have to refill your prescription if it actually fixed the problem?
yeah,
If a disease could be really understood, it doesn't need to be medicated. You need to identify the cause, right? And the thing is, we know it's not like this is novel rocket science. We know that inflammation is the root. The medical community doesn't not deny this.
yeah,
Inflammation is the root. So what causes inflammation? Why do we stop there? Because when you stop there, medication is no longer the answer. And this is
yeah,
and it's no fault of the doctors. They're not trained beyond that. Their toolkit limits them to diagnose and prescribe. Diagnose and prescribe. That's the job they do. That's what they're allowed to do. If they do anything beyond that, they're at risk of losing their license. I know a clinician in California that just because he told a family to spread out their child's vaccinations, not even not take them, but just spread them out so there's less heavy metal exposure in a short time, he lost his license,
it's
right?
wild.
So, and that was his opinion, that was his belief, and as a doctor, he wasn't allowed to practice it. So, anyways, having said all that, yeah, it's like they're limited in their toolkit, and you need to build your own toolkit, which is understanding what causes inflammation and also what causes autoimmunity.
Yeah.
And your unique genome will give you sort of a purview into that to sort of catalyze it and get there faster. But that's healthcare. It's just not having inflammation, having good cellular health.
Yeah. So, whilst we're on that topic, then, so autoimmunity. So, what is the root cause for autoimmune diseases then? Because these, like, it's something that I personally don't understand myself, but you kind of have to think to yourself that if it's happened at a certain point in your life, it must be caused by something.
Yeah. So again, this thing that gets diagnosed and managed, we can understand why. And so I told you I was missing the GSTM1 gene, which is a primary first line of defense for the gut. Now, there's some people that have extra copies of that gene. They're the opposite of me. I have zero, they have 120%. So they're doing more than they're supposed to be. If you take that in the caveman reality, where once in a while there was a toxic plant or you ate a funky mushroom that you weren't supposed to eat, you were the person that would survive and thrive because your gut had this really great detox capacity, right?
Yeah.
Move that into today's reality where you have that amazing gut detox and the food is so toxic if you're not careful, there's a constant detox response. Get it out, get it out, get it out, get it out. Because you're good at it. It leads to autoimmunity. Because you're so good at fighting the fight, your body ends up fighting itself.
Yeah.
This is one of many reasons. Now, and this is why, the other thing is there's no single cause, right? For women, it's often their hormones. And we believe that there's testosterone and there's estrogen and that's it, but there's a lot more going on. When women make estrogen, they create estrogen metabolites, second layer versions of estrogen, and some of those cause inflammation. Some of those, when you trickle constantly, month after month after month, can lead to an autoimmune state. So there isn't a single answer, but the good news is there's answers. We can figure out what's broken in your biology, what would that potentially equal, and now how do we unwind that and make it better?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, you speak a lot about, or I hear you talk a lot about something called leaky brain.
Yeah.
What is leaky brain? Because that sounds like it sounds savage.
Yeah. So it's not the,
Probably
the
is.
brain, it's the opposite where things can get into the brain. So there's a barrier called, so both your gut and your brain have barriers to prevent toxins from entering, things that were never meant to be in your brain tissue. Now we have things in our body that our body doesn't recognize that are able to cross what's called the blood-brain barrier. So, and this is why leaky gut is so important. So your gut, in the lining of the gut, you have what are called these tight junctions, so these little blocks that come up against each other, and they can open and close to allow certain things to pass through. And this
Yeah.
is why seed and vegetable oils are so important and toxic, because these seed and vegetable oils, we keep hearing that they're bad. What are they doing? They cause these junctions to open up, which means your gut is leaky because things can pass through directly out of your gut wall. So when you're eating something and there's toxins in it, those toxins can exit out your gut wall and go directly into your bloodstream without being broken down. Now that toxin, the blood-brain barrier doesn't recognize as something it needs to block, and it allows it to pass through. And now it can enter your brain. This is why poor gut health is directly connected to anxiety, depression, and bigger things like Alzheimer's. So
Mm.
often when we treat the anxiety, oh, you have a mental health issue, you actually have a leaky brain, leaky gut issue. There's things causing inflammation to your brain that are making you feel a certain way, that if you were to remove those inflammatory insults, you don't actually have bad wiring or a chemical imbalance or a need for medication. You need to fix your gut and fix your leaky brain, and then all of a sudden you're back to the way you started, and that thing doesn't exist.
Yeah. So with that then, so I mean, obviously, it's just it's madness because like when you're talking about seed oils, I literally walk through a shopping like supermarket, and I can just picture now the amount of oils that are on there. So what are actually the safest ones to pick then?
So going back to ancestral habits, grass-fed butter, superfood, right? We demonized it because the margarine industry and seed oil industry came out, and they had to demonize it. It's just good marketing for them, right? But it's really powerful food. Ghee, which is another form of dairy-based oil, coconut oil, coconut butter, olive oil. Of course, you want to not cook it. You want to eat it raw because it has all these polyphenols that break down when you warm it up.
Mm.
So get tallow, beef tallow, getting back to authentic original stuff as opposed to the synthesis of fake foods is for profit and for convenience.
Mm.
And the truth is that we don't need to eat as much as we think, right? So, yeah, so and you're avoiding all the canolas and the sunflower oils and the seed. Canola, by the way, isn't even a real thing. Like, tell me what a canola plant looks like.
Yeah,
What is, what
it
is
is very true.
what is a canola plant? And farmers will tell you, I grow canola. They don't even know what it is. There's
Yeah.
something called rapeseed, and rapeseed was used to make industrial lubricants for cars, not for food. And then some Canadian scientists found a way, and the reason why it wasn't used for food because it has a particular acid in it. Uralic, I forgot the name of the acid. Uralic acid, I think. And so these Canadian scientists found a way to extract that acid so that it became edible. So canola actually means Canadian something low oleic acid. It's not a plant. It's a word, right? So,
Mm.
but you see these beautiful pictures of yellow flowers on a canola bottle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So all it is industrial car lubricant for which the oleic acid was removed, and it will slowly kill you.
Yeah. Um, and what about sugars? Because sugar is, I mean, it gets a bad rap. But how bad is sugar and how is it affecting us?
So when you look at something like a cancer cell, for example, it has 50 times the glucose receptors of a normal cell. It loves sugar. When you look at something like mycotoxins, the mold, second level toxin from mold, which is in your gut typically, loves sugar, eats sugar, thrives off of sugar. When you look at the way we get our sugar, which is refined white sugar, highly inflammatory, as addictive, if not more so than cocaine, literally.
Mm.
So it's structured and designed as a way to make you addicted to food, again, to preserve food. And what did I say earlier? That the outcome of food science is how to make it last longer and how to make it addictive, and also to reduce the price, the cost, right? But these are the two big things these guys are always aiming for. How does it last longer, and how does it make you want to eat more? Both of those things, sugar does. Now you have to be really careful about what type of sugar. For example, high fructose corn syrup, which is a sweetener. There was science in, I think it was at Baylor College, where they took people and put them on a quote unquote American diet, which meant a lot of high fructose corn syrup. And they took healthy people that didn't eat these foods. 6 days of high fructose corn syrup, and they had a 600% increase in lipogenesis, which means fat production from the liver. And you wonder why, the Walmart phenomenon is going on. You see all these memes and videos of what Americans look like,
Yeah.
right? So it's not that they are genetically obese. They have a 600% increase in fat production unnecessarily from one ingredient.
Mm.
So and that can go on and on about sugar, but there's all these versions of it that are unsafe, but then there are versions that are safe.
Yeah.
That you can when you eat maple syrup, for example, you can literally go through that experience without breaking a fast. You can stay in autophagy. There's fasts that will tell you use maple syrup to get all your minerals and a little bit of energy, and you'll keep going because it's a different type of sugar. We know that certain fruits have the exact amount of fiber. They're designed perfectly where the fiber will mitigate the insulin response of the sugar. Fiber is like the opposite of sugar. But we also know that fruits were grown in the spring and summer, and they were eaten through the fall. The fructose that's in fruit is processed through the liver, which means the outcome is fat production. They are designed to give you the fat you need to survive the winter. That's what fruits do. So again, we are no longer symbiotic with the seasons, with our local, plants, etc. So we just have pineapple all year long, right? But just keep
Yeah.
that in mind also. Fruit is great, but if you overdo it, it will increase fat production because of how it's processed in your
So,
body.
what would you say? Because I mean, I'm big into my health and what I eat and stuff like that, and I always look for like the lowest calorie fruits because I love fruit. Like I could sit there and eat fruit all day long.
Yeah.
But then, a trainer one time said to me, they were like, yeah, you probably want to stay away from like really sugary fruits because it could have an adverse effect. And I was like, oh my God, like what world are we living in? Fruit
Yeah.
makes you fat. What would you say from a fruit aspect? What are the kind of the best fruits that you can eat that are not going to cause as such so much damage?
So what your trainer was talking about, there was a news that came out where zoos are having challenges with malnutrition because the fruit is so genetically altered and so sweet that animals are refusing to eat it.
Mm.
Because the animals instinctively know this is not real food. This is way too sweet. It's designed for our new changed palates that's addicted to sugar. And so the sweetness has been ramped up. The fruits we eat don't taste like they're supposed to taste and they have far too much sugar. So you
Mm.
want not genetically altered, non-GMO, organic and clean. You want the authentic fruit as it was meant to be, not some genetically altered candy, essentially, right?
Yeah.
And the other thing I would say is there's this unique phenomenon where when you mix certain fruits, they wipe out each other's nutrient value. So if you are in the tropics, you might get banana, pineapple, and coconut. If you're in the bush, you might get berries. If you're on a field, you might get apples, pears, and oranges from a tree, right? When you mix banana with berries, the banana prevents you from absorbing all of the anthocyanin and all the nutrients that are in the berries. So they were not meant to be put together. So that's
So when you
one big thing. Sorry?
so when you're having that blended up fruit smoothie, it's got berries and bananas. It's like the worst thing for you.
Yeah, it's not bad for you, but you're not getting any of the nutrition that you think you're getting. They literally
Wow.
wipe each other out. So you're getting the sugar, essentially. And this
Mm.
is why when people test their insulin and their sugar levels after, weeks of smoothies, they find that they're making themselves metabolically unhealthy. It's very different getting it from a blender than eating it, right?
Yeah.
So just that, so fruit, superfood, non-GMO, organic and clean. And, there's concerns around, if you want to know what does the problem with organic, well, the logistics around the fruit industry is they're grown somewhere, but they're sold everywhere else.
Mm.
And grocers never want to have a break in supply. And so they need to make sure that there's an overstock. And now if there's overstock, food rots. That's a problem. So there's chemicals that are used that sort of flash freeze the aging of a fruit. And it looks like a literal gas chamber. So they put the fruits in these gas chambers, spray it with this chemical, and it stops the fruit from maturing. It literally freezes it in time. That then gets stored, and then when needed, brought back into the food supply, and there's another chemical applied to remove the first chemical, and then within 2 weeks of that date, the fruit actually rots.
Oh my
So
gosh.
you should not be eating this stuff, right? So
Yes.
this is where, as close as you can get to regenerative, plucked from the tree, farmer's market, organic and clean, not sprayed, is what we're meant to eat. And the closer you get to big box grocery store, shiny, waxy, lasts forever. You cut an apple open and leave it on your desk, and for some reason it just doesn't rot.
Mm.
If you remember when we were kids, if you even for 5 minutes didn't eat your apple fast enough, it would turn all brown from the iron.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, the other day, many months ago actually, my daughter left her school bag at school, and I picked it up after the weekend, and she had sliced apples in there that looked like they were just sliced. Why?
Mm.
Because a fruit is not what you're eating. A fruit is a conduit to extract nutrition from the earth, minerals, micronutrients, and put it into the context you can actually consume.
Yeah.
And if the earth is dead and so heavily sprayed with chemicals that there's no worms left of their pooping that are making the healthy soil that it causes minerals and microbes, etc., then you're buying literally a ball of sugar.
Yeah. Um, where I mean, when we talk about this, it's like, first of all, how do you remain in a positive mindset, knowing full well all the horrific news that you got you understand, you get bombarded with? Like, how do you remain positive in delivering this message?
So to me, as much as when I talk to someone, for example, about genetic testing, the first
Mm.
thing I always hear from them is, I don't want to know if I'm getting Alzheimer's. Don't need to know. The anxiety of that alone will give me Alzheimer's. That's what people think, right?
Yeah.
So yes, I agree. Until you realize that there's something you can do, right? Until you realize that this is not a prescription. Again, everything I'm saying here, if you come from the medical perspective of
Mm.
it is what I'm saying and there's no other choice, here's your prescription, here's the name of your disease, it is what it is, that's not true. What we're
Mm.
saying is you need to hear this stuff to wake up. You need to hear this stuff to not take for granted that things are just safe. You not take for granted that government regulatory bodies are actually doing their job,
Mm.
right? So wake up and then take charge, and then you'll start to behave like the people online that we make fun of, that
Yeah.
talk about their food, talk about their spirituality, talk about their connection with the earth, that ground themselves, and you'll start to understand why those people are so hooked on that because they feel so good.
Yeah.
And they didn't realize that that was their potential, that they could be that healthy and have that much energy and that much libido and that high quality sleep. And all these things were what we were meant to experience, but we're dragged down with inflammatory toxins all the time. So I say all this stuff not to leave you with good luck, you know. It's more like, now that you know this to be
Yeah.
true, look for more, find the
Yeah.
problems, and change your habits, because you
Yeah.
still can. You can find that local regenerative farmer. You can prioritize going with your kids on the weekend to pluck things from a tree as opposed to buying them from a grocery store. Make this
Mm.
part of your lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
Make it a priority, because if you don't, we have a $4 trillion healthcare industry in the United States.
Yeah.
That's the other option.
Yeah.
90%, 3.6 trillion is spent on chronic disease management.
Mm.
66% of American personal bankruptcies are based on healthcare costs. So that's
Mm.
the other option, right? So it's all
Yeah.
very optional.
No, 100%. I think when you say that as well, it makes me worried about living in a place like Dubai where, there's not much farming that goes on here. I can't go to a strawberry farm and pick strawberries. But the healthcare industry, I've been banging on about this for a long time, that they're a business and they just want to make money. But why do you think, I mean, maybe I'm asking a question which I've just already answered, but why are the healthcare industry not doing what you're doing? Surely that's more profitable.
Well, the answer to everything I'm saying is not so much what do you need to add. So keep in mind that our anticipation with any solution is, I'm going to go to an expert and they're going to tell me what to add, what
Yeah.
medicine, what therapy, etc. A lot of what we're talking about is, you're supposed to be healthy. Here's what you need to remove. We are genetically designed to live to 100. If you look at the physical structure of DNA, there's these caps on the end called telomeres that are like protective bumpers that prevent your DNA from getting damaged and oxidized. The physical structure of those caps, they're designed to last 120 years. So that tells me that as long as you do everything right, that's where you should get to with good health. The fact that the average American life expectancy is 78 for women, I think 76 for men, is not because, that's when we die. It's because the poor choices we're making are taking years away
Yeah.
from the 120. And we know this because if you look at the blue zones where people are of their ancestral habits in their ancestral location, of their ancestral foods, etc., 110, 115 is quite typical. And with good health. They're walking, playing with their grandchildren until the last day. So this is why, because the answer to everything what I'm saying isn't a pill, isn't a therapy. It's just avoid a bunch of nonsense. You already have the God-given gift of living to 120 with good health.
Yeah. So when you see, the results of people's genetics and stuff like that, like, are you able to kind of get an understanding of how long this person's going to live for then?
So if it's kind of like this, here's your DNA, here's all the red flags. If you have these sets of habits, you're going to not do so well. If you have these sets of habits, you're going to thrive. So these are the habits that will get you to 120 in good health. These are the habits where you might have your first chronic disease at 55, which is the average American right now. So that's really what we're able to say. It's not. There are some people that say we'll predict the day you're going to die. I think there's some gray area there because if you don't know the person's environment, nutrition, and lifestyle, how can you determine an outcome? You don't know what they're doing, right? So it's a question of that. The DNA will tell us what to prioritize, what biology is broken, what system doesn't work. Is it your hormones? Is it your gut? Is it your mind? Then you know exactly what to do to not carve years off of that 120 you already have. That's what
Yeah.
we're doing.
Nice. So when we talk about, obviously antioxidants is one that gets thrown around quite a lot on how to prevent, all these toxins. And I've heard you talk a lot about vitamin E, CoQ10. But what type of food sources highly consumed these types of antioxidants, or is it best for supplement-based samples of these vitamins and antioxidants?
Yeah, so I would say for the average person, you're starting with supplements to get going and then start to learn about food, right? The food changes take longer. So we just talked about the blue zones.
Mm.
Okinawa, Japan, everybody eats purple sweet potatoes. Purple sweet potatoes are rich in something called anthocyanin, potent antioxidant. And this is part of the reason that they age slower because they're supporting their mitochondria and their cellular health.
Yeah.
They also eat fermented foods almost daily. So they're supporting their gut microbiome with the right diversity of flora. And if you find anyone that has a chronic disease, it's almost certain they have a gut issue. The two are interconnected, right? It's very consistent. So now that same anthocyanin is found in blueberries.
Yeah.
And there's research around if you eat a cup of blueberries a day, you can reverse your biological age of your brain by a decade in a year. So it's so powerful, the antioxidant value. Your brain has a really high density of mitochondria, these things that create energy, right? They're in your cells. And so if you're supporting cellular health and antioxidation, they start to thrive and your brain just functions better. So there's plenty of science on a cup of blueberries a day, proper, wild, clean, organic, will boost your brain activity and literally reverse the aging of your brain if damage has already been done. It also kills cancer cells, right?
Mm.
Then there's, for example, spirulina. There's this thing that people use as a superfood. They don't really know what it does. The pigment that makes blue spirulina blue is called phycocyanin, and it's also what chemotherapy is made out of. So they realize that this stuff kills cancer cells. But instead of telling you go eat spirulina every day, it synthesizes something called chemo to respond to you already being sick, as opposed to preventing getting sick in the first place, right?
Yeah.
Um, and in terms of antioxidants, I'll tell you a couple more things. When you look at some of the bigger mitochondrial supplements, things that are designed to support mitochondrial health, which keeps you aging slower, they're often using a compound called urolithin A. And urolithin A is a pomegranate extract. So if you eat a lot of pomegranate or drink pomegranate juice, you're going to get a healthy dose of urolithin A, which supports your mitochondria and supports antioxidation, right? And the other big ones are in the supplement world, glutathione, uh, ergothioneine. There's a lot of supplements around NAC, N-acetylcysteine, alpha lipoic acid, selenium, milk thistle. There's a lot of antioxidant type detox support things you can take. And it's kind of like in today's reality, it's no longer an option. You need to be supporting your liver
Yeah.
because the world is so toxic.
Yeah. And we're just talking about, obviously, we're talking about antioxidants, but obviously one of the root causes for that is environmental stressors, as well as free radical damage. And all this as well is not even just linked to making you sick, it's also linked to making you look a lot older than you actually are, right?
Yeah, yeah. The physical manifestation of aging, your skin sags, your hair turns white, right? So what is aging? It's the oxidation of DNA. So your DNA actually gets damaged, wear and tear, and the cells start to unravel and open up, and then that shows outwardly. You get white hair, you get, like we said, saggy skin, and this is why people that work on biohacking, biological age reversal will literally reverse their biological age. Take me, for example. I told you earlier that when I got sick, I was 38, right? I'm now 44. When I got sick, about a year into it, almost 39, I tested my biological age and I was 43. So inside, I was about 5 years older than myself, 4.5 years older than myself. I had prematurely aged myself because my habits were not aligned to my genome. I'm now 44, so 5, 6 years have passed, and my biological age is tested as 33. So not only
Wow.
did I stop the problem, not only did I make up for those 5 years that I aged myself, I was actually able to reverse and maintain that age. And I've been that 33 for 3 years now, inside,
Mm.
right? So we know this work can be done. We know that the body is designed to recover, it's designed to regenerate, it is resilient, it already has everything it needs to repair itself. You need to stop exposing it to all these threats so it can get to work and do the thing.
Yeah. So that kind of leads nicely on to, at the beginning, I mentioned about I've seen some of the kind of content you put out about SPF and sunscreens and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But let's talk about deodorants and sunscreens, cosmetics. Like, how dangerous are they for today's society?
So sunscreen is, I almost feel like we're being mocked by the people that make these things because how could I
Yeah.
know? I know what I know. I'm not a scientist. How could they not know what I'm about to say? Sunscreen, so there's UVB and UVA rays, right?
Mm,
UVB, sunscreen will protect you from UVB. And UVB hits the surface of your skin and burns you. You feel it,
mm,
right? And so sunscreen is designed to protect you from that burn, and you feel like it's working. It does not protect you for the most part from UVA. And UVA is the actual ray that goes subcutaneous past the layers of skin and damages your cells and causes cancer.
yeah.
So not only are you not protected from it, but you're being protected from the thing that causes the burn to stay out in the sun longer,
Mm,
right? So it's literally the opposite of what it's supposed to do. And how many people will tell you that I used sunscreen for years and I got skin cancer? So, looking at this from another perspective, there was a study that was done at Baylor University in Texas, in Houston, and they took animals and they gave half of them a healthy carnivore diet, and they gave the other half a American diet, seed oils, starches, sugars, typical American diet. They put them out in the sun. The animals that were on the seed oils and vegetable oils, 25% of them got skin cancer. The ones that were carnivore, zero, 0%, not even one, from this exact same exposure. Because the foods we eat, like we said, inflammation is the root of everything. If there's no inflammation, you're not getting sick. So seed oils and sugars cause skin inflammation. And we don't realize that when the skin is in that state, that same threat of the sun goes from nutrition to poison. The
mm,
sun delivers you a ton of nutrition, right? But that same thing can make you sick because you're no longer fortified against it. We wear our sunglasses, you know, we already have natural defenses against the sun, which is when your eyes see sunlight, you automatically start producing melanin in the skin. Meanwhile, we're told go out with sunglasses to block that interaction with the sun and not produce melanin, the natural
Mm.
defense. Instead, put sunscreen. So, and the last thing about sunscreen is they're full of these forever chemicals and hormone disrupting chemicals. And so, for women particularly, horrible news, wrecking your hormones. But you can get good stuff. You can get minerals. You can use oils. You can use fats, and there's things you can do. You don't need to get that bottle of chemical soup, right?
Yeah, because I was actually researching this because again it's a topic that I just am so fascinated about because even skincare brands will say, "Oh, use SPF," and like most men that you talk to, and I've done a load of surveys based on this, is they're always like, "Oh, when are you doing an SPF? When are you doing an SPF?" But I actually researched that in ancient civilizations they used to use olive oil to protect them
Yeah.
against the sun.
Yeah, yeah, olive oil, minerals, even some fats, and they do the job, right? And
Mm.
uh, the key is to be healthy, right? The key to everything. It's the same answer essentially to everything. Why
Mm.
are these things caused? Inflammation.
Yeah.
It's a combination of inflammation and where you have bad hardware equals the problem you're going to get first. You're going to get a
Yeah.
problem if you have inflammation. We just don't know which one,
Yeah.
right? So, but yes, olive oils, minerals, there's a lot of alternatives.
So we've shared a ton of information, and like I could probably sit here and try and talk to you for hours on end, but I appreciate that you're obviously a busy man. But let's talk about your business, the DNA company. How long has it been going for?
So we started the research in 20, started building the algorithms. Remember, I come from outside the industry. I'm not a scientist, PhD, scholar, academic, but I think that's exactly what was needed because
Yeah,
up until
100%.
then, those were the only people that were using the science, and so it wasn't actionable, it wasn't relevant to our everyday concerns. And so I came in as a layperson and said, this stuff is useless. I don't need to know what percentage risk I have of breast cancer or Alzheimer's or whatever. I need to know what's causing it. Why are you telling me this? When you say 80% chance of something, why? And they actually
Yeah.
didn't know, right? Because the funding from pharma was all disease centric. How do we make pills? And so they didn't want the research to go beyond that. So, anyways, that's what work we did in the first 3 years. I spent with 7,000 people, one by one, understanding why they got sick or didn't get sick based on the combination of their genome and their habits. And we
Yeah.
documented all those things. And then 3 years later, put out a test and report, started clinical services. And now I myself run my own clinical practice. So I'm the founder of the DNA company, but the majority of my time is actually helping people in groups and corporate, etc., as an actual coach, getting them through their genome.
Yeah, yeah, because I mean, it's true what you say. Because when you talk about pharma as well, like they back so many different organizations. Like again, some people will listen to this and be closed-minded and think this is just like skeptics talking about things, but like we genuinely live in an extremely corrupt environment. Like,
Yeah.
you've got the problem funding what we think is the solution, and it's just feeding back into each other. I mean, when I did a lot of research into the products that I was using, but yes, I and then I started to research, and I was like, I like grooming and keeping myself in a good condition, etc. And I looked into organic natural products, and then I came across this governing body called EcoCert, which effectively they approve all of the ingredients that are so-called safe for this for us to be using in
Yeah.
our cosmetic products. And then when I dug a bit deeper, I was like, where the exclusion list? Why is there an exclusion list? And then I went to that exclusion list, and on that exclusion list is all the ingredients you in the beginning you actually don't want in your products.
Opposite. The entities that are meant to be protecting us are working for industry, right? The FDA is funded by pharma. It's not a secret.
Yeah,
Their budget comes from pharma. How does that make any sense?
yeah,
Right? And so you have this deep relationship, you have lobbying, you have industry interwoven with government. It's not even a conspiracy theory or a secret anymore. It's in your face, right?
yeah.
So this is where you have to take charge and do go to, for example, if you're in the United States, start to learn the European regulatory landscape and know that what's happening in the US is not enough for you.
Mm,
Right? You do have there's I think a couple of thousand chemicals that are banned in cosmetics in the EU that are allowed in the US. Right?
yeah.
Why is it that? So knowing this, that don't take for granted that the protective agencies are protecting you.
Yeah.
There's so many loopholes. I'll give you one small example. The FDA allows what are called fragrances, how something smells. They allow companies to take certain chemicals that are known to be cancer causing, carcinogenic, etc., and hide them under the word fragrance so they don't have to list them as an ingredient.
Yeah.
Why do we know this? Because so many people were getting sick from these chemicals that the state of California, independent of the federal regulatory landscape, said that you're no longer allowed to use the word fragrance. You have to break up every chemical that you hid under that word. And the label went from this to this.
Yeah.
But in every other state in the United States, the label is still this.
Mm,
So they know that industry is hiding these things under this,
yeah.
and they're allowed. So don't you can't trust it. You have to learn, and this is why we're doing this here today. You have to learn.
Yeah, and just going back to obviously the company and setting it up, like because one thing that I feel like you don't talk too much about when people interview is obviously your business journey. You're obviously a credible entrepreneur and successful founder. So how were the challenges? Because when what people don't realize is everyone glamorizes starting a business, right? But in reality, it's extremely hard work that where you never switch off. And even I suppose with you being in, let's call it an established kind of position now when it comes to like the name of your business, it's still non-stop. So what were some of the challenges when you went from being an entrepreneur in one space and moving into a space which is quite a delicate one?
Yeah, I think Elon Musk says that deciding to become an entrepreneur is like chewing on broken glass. Like if you're not willing to go through that kind of pain, don't bother. Right?
Yeah,
It's making that choice. So I went into an industry that is so indoctrinated and controlled by another major industry called, right? You will get squashed, you'll get destroyed, you will get even killed, some conspiracy theorists will tell you, right? So I had to find a way to interweave myself. And so this is where the challenges are unique in the world that I'm in because it is, again, we're talking about a $4 trillion industry just in the United States that does not want things to change, that is
yeah,
using education as a way to control and manage licensing and who's even allowed to say anything and what they're allowed to say to that degree.
mm,
And so what was needed was this and this is what the one thing I would say to anyone entrepreneurial who's trying to climb a mountain and do something big is the straight path may not be the right path because that straight path is already being managed with all the checkpoints from the people that don't want you to succeed. So I had to do this. I had to go out and speak and podcast and put out content and not take the straight path, not buy ads and not do sort of academic education. Go direct to the people that were sick and tell them, I know why you're sick, and actually achieve outcomes
yeah,
and create a set of data that is completely indisputable, where it no longer matters when somebody asks me, tell me about your education and your PhD. Tell me about your training. Tell me about your studies that you published. Tell me about this study. Why is it different than what you're saying? I don't care because people are getting better and they also don't care.
yeah,
They no longer care because the study that you're pointing to that is different than what I'm saying didn't help them get better,
yeah,
right? So that grassroots, it's now possible because of social, because of tech, right? And I would say that if you're trying to do something big, if you're trying to disrupt, if you're trying to change the way people think, that's how you do it, is you actually achieve the outcome, grassroots, change people's lives, work for purpose, not for profit, and the profit is an automatic byproduct.
yeah. That's a really interesting insight there, and it's like I say, it's so interesting to get somebody and one thing that was actually one of the other questions I want to ask is obviously your personal brand. Like this is something that you've done incredibly well with, which it's the reason why I'm here, right? Your personal brand drew me into you. I started consuming all your content, every single piece of, I'm sure if you go back and check all your automations, I've signed up to pretty much everything you've offered, because it's just such good information. So how important is personal branding to becoming also a successful entrepreneur?
Yeah, thought business is built on thought leadership today, right? That's part and parcel of what I was saying that I had to do, which is we had a science team, we had PhDs out there speaking, etc., getting sucked into the existing model where there was control and management. So I had to go out there and become this thought leader and speak, not for the intention of building a personal brand, but because that's what people are seeking, authenticity.
Yeah.
Today, people are so skeptical because of all of what they experience that the authenticity radar is on high alert. And if you do have it, if you believe it and there's a purpose, people will feel it. They'll recognize it. That's the thing people are looking for. And I actually, when I went and started, talking on social, posting stuff, which really wasn't that long ago, um, I had this aha moment one day where I realized social media is social. I didn't realize what it was. I thought it was a thing that I had to do as a CEO, just as a profile. Like you have to be active. You have to, when people Google you, they have to find something, right? So that's all I was doing. Then I realized it's social. This is now how people interact. This is where people go to learn because they don't trust the other sources anymore because they've disappointed them. So when I started speaking the truth as my authentic self, things started to explode because that's what people are seeking, right?
Yeah.
So it freed me to be myself and it freed people to find exactly what they needed. So that authenticity, I would say, is key.
And then one final question that I've got for you, Kashif, is, if any of the listeners, myself included in that, is wondering how they can work with the DNA company and get involved in understanding their genetics and where their potential issues may lie, how can they do that, and what is the process?
Yeah, so there's kind of two answers to that. There's the DNA company, the company that I built, but then there's, I'm assuming based on the discussion we had today, people are going to ask how can they work with me, right? So my website will allow you to buy our testing, and if it's there, then it allows you to work with coaching with me. Meaning I run group programs, I run education, I run training to help people. It's not a test. I don't think that's enough. I think you need to go through a bit of a journey in education because your DNA doesn't change. So the thing you're born with is what you're going to die with. You should really have a deep understanding of it. So a test and report is not enough. It's like let's go through this thing and really spend time and learn on it. So my website, cashconofficial.com, allows you to buy testing, but also then be in my database and work with me. If you want to work more clinical, the DNAcompany.com allows you to work with doctors, oncologists, etc., things of that nature. So optimization, being the best version of yourself, living forever, feeling your best. Go to my website, look there. If it's like I have breast cancer and I need someone other than my doctor to work on this, go to the DNAcompany.com.
And
Yeah.
then one quick fire question actually I've got for you that I want to ask before you leave and go and continue your day. If there was one thing in the world you could get rid of, what would it be?
Wow. Um, one thing. I think one thing we could get rid of. Well, literally the first thing that came to mind was, and I don't know if these are the right words, but government control, meaning that we no longer have bodies that work for us, but instead manage us, right?
Mm.
So if I could change that, where those entities actually fulfill their promise and work for the citizens as opposed to industry, we would have completely different lives.
It's a huge. I mean, like I've watched obviously stuff that you've done with the talk with Dave Asprey, and there's a few guys like yourself in the space that are really trying to make a change. I think the I'm going to call it the big boys club, meaning governments and all these people that have for so long raped and pillaged people. I will exclude UAE from that because I've lived here for 11 years now, and all they are is all for the people, not
Yeah.
against the people. But the Western world, I mean, even my country in general, England, you just have to look at it and you just think they work for the big organizations because the big organizations fund them, and the people that suffer are the everyday people. So I think people like yourself that are trying to shed a light on important topics like this, honestly, you'll go down in history as somebody to be reckoned with. So you keep doing what you're doing. You've helped inspire me a lot. So thank you very much for that. And I look forward to consuming even more content of yours and getting sucked into that deep hole of what's going on in the world. So no, but yeah, honestly, like I say, thank you so much for taking time out of your day. And yeah, thank you so
Pleasure,
much.
pleasure, man. Yeah, I still have a lot more to vent about, so I'll keep putting the content out there.
Awesome, awesome. Maybe we can do like a part two sometime then, or maybe even an Instagram live. But
We'll do it. Let's do it.
nice.
Yeah.
So, guys, if you like that episode, which I'm sure you will, because I was just literally looking at the clock, thinking, "Oh, please, it's time, just stop, so I can ask more questions." Make sure you hit subscribe button, and if we do get enough comments, maybe I can have a little chat with Kashif and see if he'll come back on again, or maybe even do a live discussion where he can answer some of your questions as well. So, if you'd like that, drop your comments below in the section comment. Also, don't forget to subscribe. And yeah, we'll see you next week. All the details for Cash will be in the show notes. So if you want to connect with him, I'll leave them all there. So again, thank you very much, guys, for spending your eyes and ears in this amazing episode. Cash, thank you very much. Have an awesome
Pleasure, man.
time. See you soon, mate.
Yeah, see ya.
Thank you.